Welcome back to the Rage On podcast. I am your host, Dr. Kyle Dean Freeman, men's empowerment coach. And today I have a special friend on the podcast, Micah Kearns. Micah, we met in an interesting place in the world. We met in Mongolia in the backcountry on a tour and had a wild adventure together. And through that journey, I got to learn a lot more about you. And I knew that I needed to hear more about your story and to share it with the men out there who could benefit from hearing about your struggles and your journey. So, Micah, you are a design lead at FoxHaus Creative, and you are exploring the world at this moment, currently on this podcast from, I believe you're in Hanoi, exploring why we fear failure. And so, thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate you being here, Micah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so,
Um,
as we get into it, just give people a little bit of backstory about where you come from and what led you to where you're at now, exploring the world.
yeah, absolutely. Um, let's see. I was a, mm, I've always been an interesting person. Throughout school and throughout my 20s and 30s, um, having a lot of zest for life, dealing with ADHD, just always having this like bursting energy for living life to the fullest that I could, and having lots of different experiences, and so being very open-minded. Um, and then in 2018, I was married, I had a house, I had an amazing job, the car, the everything. Finally succeeded and achieved the American dream, right? Even had a white picket fence. Um, and then everything fell apart. And I got a very sudden surprise divorce. Um, got laid off of my job, really lost my relationship with my parents, was forced to sell the house. A lot of my friends pulled away because of the mess and confusion of the divorce. And so I ended up just like completely having the rug pulled out from under me. And really disoriented and hunting for scraps to hang on to give my life some purpose, some framework, some consistency. And struggling really, really hard with that. I started getting back on my feet and uh, discovered this global speaker series called Fuck Up Nights that was started in Mexico City in 2013. And I was like, oh, this is perfect. This is so on topic for the things that I'm interested in. So I organized the Sacramento chapter of that and started being really successful and getting a lot of momentum. And then COVID happened and just decimated that also. And so that died pretty quickly also. Um, and so during COVID, I was able to stay afloat through various means. I know a lot of people had to be very creative about scrambling to survive through that. Um, But then when COVID started sort of nearing the end and they started lifting travel restrictions, um, I'm still in the throes of this midlife crisis, this existential situation that I was going through. And I decided that instead of staying in California, I was going to take advantage of my flexibility as an entrepreneur and a business owner with FoxHaus Creative as my design business. Um, and I was going to traveled the world. Well, first I spent a year traveling around the US. I actually sold my house, bought a camper van, did the van life road trip for a year. And then I was like, okay, that was really cool, but that's not adventurous enough. I'm not maximizing the flexibility that I have. So I parked that van in California and then flew to Japan. And I've been working my way around East Asia for 11 months now. Um, Spending roughly a month in each country, and just hopping around and having completely random, spontaneous adventure, making friends, doing weird shit, and having a great time. Um, yeah. And then over the course of that, I've actually managed to develop um, two patents and another business. Fuck Up Nights turned into Why We Fear Failure because now instead of somebody else's brand, I created my own brand, so I have more control and more opportunities to expand it. Um, and then also picked up tutoring business English in Korea. So a couple times a week, I actually have online classes where I teach business English and idioms to a bunch of Koreans. So just still having that like interesting excitement for life, for doing things my way, for always taking the weird opportunity. And I don't know, I feel like I'm sort of like churning my feet to make my life as interesting and worthwhile as possible so that when I'm on my deathbed someday, I'm like, all right, cool. Well, that didn't turn out how I thought it would, but what a crazy adventure, what a crazy ride.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just in these past few years, it seems like you've been on a whirlwind of living different lives, living different chapters. And I know you are a Wisconsinite, right?
Yeah.
And so coming from Wisconsin originally, cheese industry, did you ever foresee any of this part of your life, living and doing what you're doing now?
Um, Not necessarily, though. I did some pretty heavy traveling when I was young. I lived in Paris for a year in my mid-20s and backpacked around Europe and did some fun things. And so I always felt like I had that personality to really be adventurous and see the world and travel. Um, and so through my 20s and 30s, when I started like settling down, I still traveled a little bit, but not in the way that I had imagined when I was younger. And so this is almost like I'm also doing this for younger me, where
Mm,
it's like despite these hardships, despite everything, I'm still managing to live the kind of life that I've always wanted to live of Indiana Jonesing my way around the world and doing random quirky things and being very creative. I mean, I have always been a creative since I was young, drawing and playing with Legos and always making things.
mhm.
Um, so I guess if I was young and I looked at myself now, I would be like, interesting, but still tracks.
Right. Right. Yeah. Being interested in Legos and now you're kind of building your own life in your own way and your own unique design, being a designer for a graphic design company of your own. And, it makes me think back of, that boy in Wisconsin and now you're this man who's takes on all these interesting opportunities, is doing a lot of hard things and traveling the world and living this unique lifestyle. Who do you credit to building you into the man that you are today?
Oh man. Just me. Um, I feel like who I became, like the person that I am now, is because almost a desperate attempt since I was young to make sense of the world around me and having sort of a bit of a vacuum of male role models that I could really relate to, or not feeling seen in a way that I felt was meaningful, always feeling
Mhm.
a slight bit of emotional abandonment and that kind of stuff. And so in my craving to be understood by other people, but also in craving to understand myself, um, ever since I was like 10, I think I really started prolifically reading um, nonfiction, history, psychology, um, not necessarily like self-help books at a really young age, but deep philosophical things that sort of started building my own framework for
Mhm.
what is it a worthwhile life. So even when I was in like early high school, I had this like, pretty interesting idea of what a worthwhile life would be. And then it's been constant self-development, through reading, through uh, lots and lots of exercises, and daily practice of trying to actually embody the things that I'm learning about.
Mhm.
But it feels really mostly self-guided. My whole life, like I said, I think it's almost an absence of any sort of like mentor or figure that really had a driving force. It was the absence of that that made me need to create myself.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And you found your way. And there's a couple of things that you brought up about role models, and there's someone we'll talk about. I think you know who we'll talk about. But feeling those feelings of emotional abandonment, and you said that now you're kind of living out the life to satisfy that younger version of you. Was there just a lack of leadership, or do you in your household growing up, or was there a lack of a good relationship with your parents?
It was definitely the opposite of a lack of leadership. Maybe a lack of effective leadership. Wisconsin, Midwest, 80s. I had just a typical Midwestern 1980s dad.
Hmm.
Um, Tended to be authoritarian, tended to be emotionally closed off, um, due to the way that he was raised, and then so I can
Hmm.
absolutely grant that it's not like he had a good role model either. Um, but this was also like very, very common back then to have these kind of like hard-nosed dads that really tried instilling discipline in their kids in ways that nowadays we know are completely ineffective, but back then that was like the norm. Um,
Hmm.
and then really like one of the big problems was when I was young, when I was in elementary, middle, and high school, I had like significant ADHD
Hmm.
and really struggled in school. And yet I was this brilliant kid that aced all my tests and yet could not do the homework. And my parents were just ripping their hair out. And so I was incredibly frustrating to them, always getting in trouble. And the way that my parents handled it, and particularly the way that my dad handled it, was about the worst that you could handle it. Um, and Yeah, so it's not necessarily that it was a lack of leadership. It was just that my parents, both of them were young and completely and totally underqualified to have a
Hmm.
child like me. So it was really more of that. And
Yeah.
then getting in trouble in school a lot. I think I had like two teachers, maybe two teachers that really like saw this weird, smart, crazy, wild, interesting kid and like took an active interest.
Sure.
Um, but other than that, it was just like you're a kid and you're like, why can't I just be like all of the other kids? I don't understand. Like I don't know I have ADHD. I don't know why my brain doesn't do the thing that I want it to. And then when you're getting all of this negative feedback from school, from parents, from peers, um, man, the emotional baggage and the shaming and the confusion and the existentialism and all of that is really heavy. And so I mean, that really was the fuel that started me on the self-knowledge and the self-development and learning history and psychology and all of these things at a relatively young age.
Hmm.
Is like desperately grasping to find something that made it make sense.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're a great example of an individual who doesn't do well in a typical school setting and school system. And most kids shouldn't be sitting, staring at a blackboard under these terrible lighting all day. And then we say they all have ADHD because they can't sit there and focus for 8 hours. And seeing you be an entrepreneur now, it all makes sense. It's that many of us, we need a different route. That's not how we're all built to learn. And I know that speaks to a lot of men out there who probably weren't good students, or maybe they were troublemakers in school because they just didn't want to be there or do it. They had other interests. And there's also another point that you brought up. There's a lot of men, including myself, who resonate with having a fatherly figure who came from a hardened background. My dad's Irish, didn't know how to express his emotions healthily,
Yeah.
yelled all the time, felt like it was a very emotionally abusive relationship with my mom and me, and didn't have like good any male friends, I should say. And so I didn't get to see what it was like to have healthy male relationships and what real affection was like. We couldn't even have like a healthy hug. It was very strange growing up. And so
Yeah.
as a result of that kind of upbringing and dealing with that in school, did you struggle to get along or create healthy relationships with other men, as well as did you struggle with your own manhood as a result of that?
Um, my dad was a great example of like a man's man in the sense of like hunting, fishing, building things, being outdoorsy, being very handy, and all of that kind of stuff. And so, um, partially because like all of that shit's pretty cool to learn, but then also in the sense of wanting to do things that my dad was into to gain his approval and have something to bond over.
Mhm.
I picked up all of that stuff, and I was in Boy Scouts, and I was like super outdoorsy, and all of that just continued to develop as I got older and older. So that was great because my dad and I had all sorts of things to share and talk about and bond over. Also, he is a phenomenal guitar player. And so from a young age, I think I was 12 when I started picking up guitar and bass guitar, and a complete and total band geek in high school. And so we also had that to bond over. I had male
Mhm.
friends in middle school and high school. Kind of the way that I transferred, I transferred school districts in fifth grade, which ended up being a really weird situation because I fell in with the wrong crowd at the new school. And the only people that wanted to be my friends were the weirdos and the troublemakers. And so I ended up getting pulled into that crowd, which
Mhm.
was pretty detrimental to my social scene for the next 4, 5, 6 years. Um, but I had a lot of guy friends. If anything, I had almost all guy friends because I was just really weird and awkward around the girls.
Mm.
And like I have a sister, and I grew up with some female cousins. We all grew up together. So I was relatively like I knew how to talk to girls. I just didn't know how to like be friends with girls in a meaningful, effective way.
Yeah.
But
Did you ever, as a result of this feeling awkward and not feeling like you fit in certain places, did you feel that you would act in certain ways to please other people or put on masks just to be accepted or fit in and be accepted by others?
yes. This is something that I've like continued to try to unpack and analyze as I've gotten older too. Um, because of the rowdy, hyperactive ADHD personality that I had, um, like the group of kids that I was friends with in high school was a pretty square group of friends. And then I was like the comedy relief,
Hmm.
the rowdy, weird, quirky, funny. Oh my God. Um, the comedy relief. And so, that was my role, that was my place. And then like many kids that were troubled in high school, um, found comedy and humor and jokes as sort of a pressure release valve, and then also a way to be accepted and a way to be um, mischievous, but in a relatively harmless way. I
Yeah.
mean, I'm still a really fucking mischievous person, and that's something I love about myself. But when you want to cause a little bit of trouble, but not enough trouble to actually get in real trouble,
Hmm.
Just being sassy and jokes and all of that kind of stuff all the time is
I
good for
love it.
that.
Just yesterday, I saw a meme that said, if you don't have childhood trauma or depression, then you're not funny. That you can't be a comedian. And I was like, I feel that. I feel that, and you see it amongst comedians.
Yeah.
But it's interesting to see, and I know that you're not alone. And something that you keep bringing up is this issue with the ADHD and feeling like you can't focus and whatnot throughout the years and as you've gotten older, because a lot of people have diagnoses, and nowadays, a lot of people are like self-identifying with their diagnoses,
Yeah.
their sexualities, their politicals, whatever it might be. But when it comes to medical, has that have you ever reconciled the relationship with that, and have you actually found strengths in having a form of ADHD in what you do now?
Um, it's something that I'm still learning about because there continues to be more and more actual scientific research about it, which is really nice because one of the reasons I started Why We for Failure in the same vein is that I was the kind of kid that always asked why, like I wanted to know why about
Mm,
everything. And when I know why something happens and it makes sense to me, all of a sudden I can wrap my head around it and I can grasp it and I can give it a framework and I can, do some work to compartmentalize it and then learn how to compensate for it is the correct word. Um, I one thing that I'm trying really hard right now is there's a lot of information that is acknowledging the conflict between childhood trauma, childhood environment, and then actual medical diagnosis of
mhm,
ADHD. So, like actual ADHD, um, there are parts of your brain that are atrophied, and your brain does not produce enough dopamine, and there's like real scientific, chemical, structural differences between how these two brain, a normal brain and an ADHD brain process each other. Except that scientists are also finding that because of the way that school is a terrible fit for like 60% of kids or whatever, and
mhm,
then childhood trauma also creates a lot of similar symptoms that they're actually having a really hard time kind of figuring out a clean way to separate the trauma from the biological factors. So the nice thing is that as I've gotten older, and I'm untangling all of this and making sense of it all, um, I do accept the diagnosis because I've been diagnosed a few times by a few different doctors. Um, I accept the diagnosis and I'm like, yeah, I have ADHD and it makes things make sense. Whereas when I was young and there was absolutely no framework for me to try to unravel some of the behaviors that I saw but couldn't explain, was really intensely frustrating and
mhm.
embarrassing and shaming. Um, yeah, so now when I read and my eyes start like skipping all over the page, and then I have to go back and reread the same paragraph 5 times, I'm like, oh, Micah, you need some dopamine. And then,
Yeah.
your brain's not making enough dopamine. And so you're having a hard time with your executive functioning. And so you can't do this. And it gives me so much more patience and compassion with myself. When I was young, I would just shame the hell out of myself, which
Mm.
was terrible and toxic as shit. Now I'm so patient. I'm so kind with myself. I understand the behavior. I understand why it exists, and I'm able to accept it and obviously figure out ways to deal with it. But so much more kind with myself than I used to be.
I love that. I love that because I know there's so many men out there who do get down on themselves and put themselves down, especially when there is this lack of understanding or just ignorance around a condition they have, or maybe an experience they went through. Maybe it was a breakup or a hard childhood, and they put themselves down. And it's often because there's just a lack of understanding of why that happened. Why did my dad act that way? Why did my mom act that way? Why did my girlfriend treat me that way? Of course, everything in my life is because of this diagnosis that this doctor gave me, and now I feel like a victim, and I feel hopeless to
I know
this.
some
And
people frame it that way too. Totally. Like some people they a diagnosis and then they almost have like a fatalistic victimhood about the diagnosis, and that's not helpful.
yeah,
That's not a
yeah,
great way to
and
handle it.
I think society as a whole is trying to make that happen in a way. I just saw a video just yesterday where young women actually are calling like their antidepressants like hot girl pills and sexy girl pills to refer to like Lexapro and different things. And
Yeah,
it's deeply disturbing because they're now identifying with these mental health conditions and making it like this owns them. Like they are forever depressed. They are forever anxious. They are forever whatever. And that's not an empowering way to live. And so I love what you shared because you don't allow this diagnosis per se to drive your life, but you've learned about it. You've learned how to modify and how to take care of yourself so it doesn't control you, but you can figure out how to utilize it to your benefit and what you need to best take care of yourself.
totally. Yeah, it's like, you're stuck with this factor, this situation, but it doesn't rule my life. I'm not letting it overshadow what my capabilities are still, despite the fact that I have ADHD, I'm still hugely capable of doing amazing things. And then also turning the shame and the confusion about into understanding and a lot of compassion and just a tremendous amount of like self-love and support. And like my
Mhm.
relationship with myself in the last 5 years has been completely different than it was when I was younger.
Yeah.
Like going through the divorce and going through all of that existential shit was like, we're going to knock you down as low as you can possibly go. And then if you're into Carl Jung and the idea of individuation, it's called positive disintegration. It's like we're going to
Hmm.
take this vase that you are, we're going to smash you into a million pieces, and now you have an opportunity to glue it back together your own way, instead of the conditioning of society, the conditioning of your parents, the conditioning of however you were raised. um Now you have a chance to really pick up each piece of that broken vase and look at it and say, you know what, I never really liked this one. This one never really felt authentic, and throw it away. And you're like, but I like this one. I'm going to put this one in there instead.
That's a beautiful way to look at life, because we all go through these different chapters and seasons, and you've been through what feels like many chapters in just the past few years, and gone through a lot of struggle and a shift in your life, going from, like you said, the white picket fence, the house, the wife, to on your own, traveling the world in Asia and doing all these different gigs, getting patents. What was that shift like when you had that loss of the relationship, and how did that change your trajectory right away?
The trajectory was just like straight into the ground. Like it's not so much a trajectory as just dropping something on the ground. Um, like all of those things happened in such short order that like I was crazy in love with my wife, and then she had this like weird breakdown and she left, and then I found out she was having an affair with one of my friends, and then I got laid off of my job, and then all of this like just like almost comedic. When you get kicked when you're down for the 10th time, it starts becoming kind of funny. And I mean, if you have a sixth sense of humor. um but it took an insane amount of, not, it's not power. Power is the wrong word. I was so suicidal for like 2 years. And
Mm,
I remember when all of this first happened, I was like, laying on the ground in the hallway of my house, like almost choking because I was crying so hard. And I called my mom and she yelled at me. And so I hung up on her. And oh, remember in Mongolia, we were talking about psychedelic assisted therapy.
Mm-hmm.
So, I was living in California at the time, and my friends and I were fans of the occasional recreational psychedelic trip. But my friends and I, because we're all complete nerds, we were learning a lot about psychedelic assisted therapy and how the FDA was testing certain psychedelics for medical use, specifically for PTSD and chronic depression and a number of different things. And we were studying the methodology. We were going to lectures, reading books, like talking amongst each other. There's an incredible book called How to Change Your Mind by Michael Pollan that is all
Yep.
about psychedelic assisted therapy, and it's like the Bible of that if you're looking to get into it. So, anyways, I'm laying on the ground, like, and I had this. I went from pretty much having a panic attack because there was like rope in the house, and I thought I was going to hang myself.
Mm.
And it's a weird feeling to like be having a panic attack because there's rope in the house, and having this feeling of like I'm not going to be able to stop myself.
Mm.
Like I don't like my body is now on some type of weird override, and I no longer have the control to stop myself as I watch myself do this thing. But anyways, instead of doing that, luckily, I had this like almost snapping moment of clarity where I was like, I'm either going to do like all of this psychedelic assisted therapy that I've been learning about. I'm either going to put that in practice right now, and I'm going to do one right now, or I'm going to blow my brains out. It's like that hard bifurcation of, well, cool. Looks like I have two options and two options only. It's either this, which is going to be, a little too dramatic for my tastes, or try this thing that I've been learning about. Um, and so I took a macro dose, pretty high dose of mushrooms,
Mm-hmm.
and I followed the FDA's methodology. I had been reading a self-help book about grief and grief processing and childhood regression therapy and all of this stuff. And so I journaled, I set some affirmations and positive thoughts, and then I laid in bed with an eye mask on under the covers, playing some kind of low-key but trippy binaural beat type music. Um, And if you know anything about neuroplasticity in your brain, how you have these pathways, these essentially thought channels in your brain. So every time
Mm-hmm.
you think a thought, it goes down this road that you've been rutting out for the last, 4 decades of your life. You're like, oh well, I guess I'm going to be depressed and think I'm a piece of shit again. Um, But there's something really special about psychedelics and their therapeutic use where it allows the neuroplasticity of your brain to almost ignore those deeply rutted channels of thought that you've always been traveling down. And it gives you an opportunity to carve new paths and have new thoughts. And so as I was setting these intentions, these affirmations, and really processing everything I was going through of like, hey, your wife left you and divorced you. That doesn't mean, that's her going through her thing. That doesn't mean you're a piece of shit.
Mm-hmm.
You got your job and but the job's really struggling. And so that, they had to make a financial decision, and it's not because you're a piece of shit. And so it's like really undoing all of this shame that I was heaping on myself. Um and reframing and reprocessing things and with the psychedelic assisted therapy part of it, your brain, your body just internalizes all of that so quickly and so deeply. And then um it takes a lot of work after the fact to continue that train of thought so that you can really set and solidify those new pathways. If you trip balls
Hmm.
and then you start just thinking the same shitty thoughts the next day, then congratulations, you had a fun time, but you completely wasted your time.
Yeah.
Um, so anyways, over the course of the next 2 years, I think I did maybe only like 6 or 8 of these macrodoses. I think I was trying to do about one per quarter because
Just
they
with
take a
mushrooms?
uh I did acid a couple times too. And actually, one of the acid trips was like the most impactful, ridiculous, impactful. Like my relationship with myself changed. My relate like the way that I talk to myself changed, and my life has been so different ever since then. But it's not just because of that trip, it's because I spent 20 years before that learning all of this psychology, learning all of this self-growth and all of these things. It was just that over the course of this series of psychedelics assisted macrodose trips, um, I really started reframing things and making these deep decisions and carving new channels into my thought process where it actually got internalized and it actually solidified. So it's not just like, oh, I dropped some acid, now I'm a different person. No,
Hmm.
no, there was a ton of setup and then there was a ton of work afterwards.
Yeah.
But I'm a different person than I was before 5 years ago, before going through the super crazy low and then the climbing my way out of that, changing my relationship with myself and going through the positive disintegration of, and positive disintegration takes a long time to glue that vase back together and say like,
Hmm.
I never really liked this piece, but I don't have another piece that fits right there right now. So I'm gonna travel the world and find something that fits there. Maybe it's something completely different, but you have to be really kind of open-minded and creative about rebuilding who you
Yeah.
want to be, what feels authentic.
I love that, man. It's incredible what psychedelics can do nowadays. I know I just had an incredible journey with ayahuasca a couple months ago. That's a whole nother story. And I'm still integrating, right? And I think
It
that's a
takes a
big
while.
the biggest piece that you shared is that whether it's through psychedelics or going to a retreat of some sort, or even working just with a therapist, it's a matter
Mhm.
of integrating what you're learning in a society where we are so conditioned to just take a pill and you'll be better. Just do this one thing and you'll be better. And we want those quick fixes, we want the quick money, whatever. But a lot of us, we need to recognize that we need to be ready to endure some pain and put the work in and integrate what we're learning. Because if we just go
Yeah.
to a talk where someone tells us how we can help our anxiety and then we go, oh, this is great, and then we don't do any of those things, well, don't
Yeah.
expect yourself to get better, right? And so I love that you shared how important the integration is. And now with that came a lot of pain. And pain is something that most of us don't want to be in. Our body naturally does everything it can to get away from pain. That's why a lot of us will cope and distract ourselves with Netflix and sex and porn and drugs and alcohol and whatever it might be, food. Um, how has going through an experience like that impacted your relationship and your understanding with pain as you go through life?
I think my whole life, even when I was young, I never shied away from pain. If anything, when I was younger, through today, had an inclination to sort of lean into it.
Beautiful.
Um, because honestly, like if you frame it the right way, there's a beautiful poetry to pain.
Hmm.
When you listen to sad songs, when you listen to I love Tom Waits as a musician,
Yeah.
and things that just really tear your heart up. or reading books that just eviscerate your soul. And so when I was in deep pain, I don't remember ever trying to run from it or hide from it. I even when I was young, I sort of just sat in it. And the trouble is that when I was young, and unaware of the healthy way to handle things, it really was gratuitously moping in this heavy sense of victimhood and um, the woe is me angst feeling.
Hmm.
Um, and as I've gotten older, there's been a little less of that. But honestly, through my 30s, I was still pretty hard on myself. So there's still the feeling of like, yeah, I'm going to allow myself to feel like deep, deep, deep shit. And there's going to be some beauty and some poetry and some romanticism of it in the classical sense of like, I mean, I've been unbelievably brokenhearted walking through the streets of Paris in the rain, and I was like, yeah, I get it. I get it. This is
Sounds
a
like
rich
we need a movie.
Oh yeah, no, I mean it's like being brokenhearted in Paris is totally worth it. Um so yeah, there's something about the poeticness of it that I always really leaned into. As I've
Yeah.
gotten older, especially as I've started doing more and more of this personal work and changing my relationship with myself, now I understand that I need to lean into it as a cleansing way of allowing it to release, as a
Hmm.
way to self-regulate.
Yeah.
And now I know the science behind it. Now I know why my nervous system wants me to feel shitty and cry, and so I can release these pent up emotions, so I'm not repressing things and internalizing them. So
Hmm.
now it's a much more knowledgeable approach to it, but at the same time, I mean, I'm still completely a sentimentalist. Um, I'll be in a mood and I will absolutely lean into it and then almost like enjoy being sad for a
Yeah.
day. Well, yeah, there's still a certain beauty to it.
There is definitely a beauty to it. I believe pain is actually what makes life beautiful and what makes the good beautiful. And I love how you said that you've always learned to lean into it. And that's something I share with clients and people who I work with. And a big reason why I do cold showers and cold plunges because
Yeah.
for people who aren't acclimated or tolerant to the cold, it can feel scary. It can feel, oh, it's going to hurt. It's going to be painful. And we give into that fear of not getting in. But I've learned that if you lean into the discomfort and you lean into the pain of being in the cold and sitting in there for a couple minutes, you come out and you feel amazing. And not only because of the benefits of cold, but because you went through something hard and you push through it and you came out the other side, and that builds that confidence in yourself. And so with pain, there's also that topic of fear, which is something that you've been exploring as you've been traveling the world, of why we fear failure. And so I'm curious, what have you learned in these 11 months or more about why you have feared failure? Because I know you're on this journey because maybe it's been on a personal note.
Yeah, definitely. I think it was in 2019 that I first discovered Fuck Up Nights, the global speaker series, and it
Mhm.
resonated with me so hard of instead of having this fear and then feeling shame about it, instead of actually fucking up and making mistakes and having this like deep sense of shame and avoidance, um, what if we all just talked about it? Like, what if we learned the psychology behind it and the physiology behind it? And then when I felt like that organization wasn't approaching it the way that I wanted to, like there wasn't enough science behind it, there wasn't enough okay, now what? Like with this information, now what? So I started my own organization and I have Why We Fear Failure on Instagram. And learning about how your body is attempting to protect itself by giving you the feeling of fear, the fear of failure, the fear of making a mistake, the fear of not being accepted, the fear of standing out, the fear of anything.
Mhm.
There's all of these mental and physical symptoms of that. And I've found that, I've learned so much because of why we fear failure about how my body works, and like polyvagal theory and amygdala hijack, and the psychology behind acute stress responses, and all of these things. And so now when they happen in me, I'm recognizing them and catching them. And it's almost like we were talking about ADHD earlier. Now, because I understand, now because I also accept that it is a physiological process that's going on throughout my entire body, and it's not just my brain being a little bitch. Um, I'm able to now approach it with so much more understanding and patience and compassion
Mhm.
and gentleness for myself. But then also being able to compartmentalize it and saying like, oh, I'm having my amygdala is hijacking my frontal lobe, so I'm having a hard time rationalizing right now, and I'm having an acute stress response. But my vagus nerve is sending me all of these alarm signals because it is afraid of me going outside of my comfort zone and doing something that is either unfamiliar or something that I've been burned by in the past.
Mhm.
But now, because I know of all of these things, now I can sort of like suppress all of those fear symptoms a little bit, and then let my prefrontal cortex, my rational thoughts take the wheel again,
Yeah.
and then override those physiological responses that I'm having. So I'm getting so much better now at feeling the fear and doing it anyway, because I understand the processes behind it.
Yeah.
Now my body feels terrified of doing something. I understand why it's happening, which makes it
Mhm.
10 times easier to reframe, regulate, and then move past.
Mhm.
And that's been gold. I love it. It's like
Yeah.
it's such a good relationship to feel all of these things going on in your body and then understand what's happening.
Yeah. Yeah. It just makes me think about coming back to ignorance is often what leads to fear. It's just what we don't know is what we fear. I know I saw it in my mom growing up, and I've seen it in myself, and I see it in clients as people come to me and there's just things they don't understand. And when you don't understand, you become hopeless sometimes, or you become fearful of taking the risks. But what I've gained from what you just shared, and I think is impactful for people to know, is through education, through self-education, as well as I'm sure through getting education from others, as well as practicing mindfulness, utilizing that new education, that new knowledge, so that in those moments when you're feeling anxiety, feeling stress, feeling that fear, flight, or the flight or fear response coming in, that you are taking a moment to pause and going, okay, I'm feeling this. Why am I feeling this? Oh,
Mhm.
this is why. How can I ground myself? What can I do to get in a better mindset and move forward and not allow the fear to get in the way of me doing things that are good for me or out of love? And
Yeah.
so I really love that. And it makes me also think of thoughtful risk. There's risk in life and everything that I forgot who said it, but there's risk in even doing nothing. And so there's a bill you have to pay for not taking risk, but
Mhm.
there is going off the deep end and jumping off a cliff and hoping you just land on your feet. That's not thoughtful risk, right? And someone who makes me think of thoughtful risk and someone that we mutually love is Anthony Bourdain.
Yeah.
And I know that he has been a man who has inspired me, inspired you, probably inspired both of us to end up meeting each other in Mongolia in the countryside, because it takes, I believe, a certain person to end up there.
Yeah. Yeah,
That's
definitely. And he has been a
curious
huge
about life,
influence.
that's curious about X. Yeah, no, and that's what I was curious. I want to know, like, how you talked about role models. And I was like, I know he's been a role model for you. How has Anthony Bourdain, the late Anthony Bourdain, rest in peace, brother, impacted your life? And now traveling the world yourself, doing your own Anthony Bourdain deal?
Um, the willingness, God, I mean, he has so many quotes that are so valuable. Like there's such healthy perspective about life. Travel, be broke. Like some of the richest things you can do are walk into a bar and drink with the locals when you don't know how to speak the language. And one of the most rich experiences you can have is to be invited into somebody's house and sit down and eat the food that they eat.
Mm-hmm.
And being open to rich, real, rough around the edges experience. He wasn't traveling the world and going to four-star restaurants. He wasn't traveling the world and only going to the Michelin starred places. He was, fucking sitting on a 6-inch tall plastic stool in an alley in Southeast Asia, eating God knows what,
Mm-hmm.
and reveling in it and loving it. And the thing that I always really loved about him, or something that I've always noticed and then kept in mind to emulate, is that people really, really love his realness. I know that one of your topics that you speak about frequently is people pleasing. And because of my past and my childhood trauma and everything, and wanting to be accepted, I know that I had a pretty good people pleasing streak when I was younger. And then somebody like Anthony Bourdain, who is, you know, grumpy and sassy and kind of depressed and chain smoking and you know, um, sex, drugs, and rock and roll in a four-star restaurant kind of vibe. And it's his realness and the fact that he shares when he's being moody, when he's being depressed, when he's being real. And that's one of the things that people revere about him the most. Though honestly, one thing that's funny is this the curse of self-awareness of like, oh, so if I want people to like me, I need to be more authentic. And you're like, no, 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 you're not getting it. Like, if I want to be more liked by people, if I want to please people more and appear to be what people want, then I need to be more authentic. So I should be more like Anthony Bourdain. And it's like, well, are you Anthony Bourdain?
Yeah.
No. So if you try to emulate him, then you're not being authentic. You're trying to copycat somebody because you like the way people respond to him.
Mm-hmm.
So it ends up being this whirlwind of self-awareness and just, until you get exhausted and go to sleep. Um,
But I'm sure there's many cues that you can take from people. I mean, we all
oh yeah,
are a mishmash. We're all like a puzzle put together by other people and influences in the world. And so if for him to be one of those puzzle pieces,
yeah.
I'm all tattooed. I've traveled the world similarly as you, and I see you on your stories on Instagram eating things that I'm like, what even is that?
Right.
And taking those wild adventures, and you drove across Indonesia on a motorbike by yourself through the rain, and just
I didn't
you
think that was
are.
wild until I got to the end of Indonesia and people were freaked out. And they're like, you did what? I was like, yeah, just drove my moped from Sumatra to Java to Bali. And they're like, and sometimes you do things and you don't understand that you're doing something big and until you get done and you see people's reactions and you're like, what? That was a big deal.
Yeah, but that's beautiful though, because it's subjective on what people see as hard or difficult or something that they can't even do. And you just did it because it felt like, yeah, I want to do this. It felt in alignment and you just followed your intuition. Would you say that?
Definitely. Yeah, it was just something I wanted to do. And honestly, I did it pretty half-assed and off the cuff. There was not much planning involved. I flew to Medan, I bought a motorbike for cash, and I started driving. And that was the plan. But so, one thing I just thought about too is that as far as like different modes of thought and mindsets and all that kind of stuff, um one thing that my ADHD did, like I have many, 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 many positive coping mechanisms that I built to compensate for that.
Hmm.
And one of the things is that bigger projects can be extremely daunting because you look at all these details and you just get overwhelmed and your eyes start swimming all over the place. Is breaking things down into smaller steps. And for especially large projects, I would like kind of create somewhat of a loose outline and be like, all right, what is actionable now? And then I would do those things. And I was like, okay, what is actionable now? And then I would do
Hmm.
those. And so I would do these baby steps. I mean, and honestly, like as I'm doing these things, I think in my head, do you remember the movie What About Bob?
I do not
With,
actually.
oh my God, What About Bob with Bill Murray? He's this like super, super crazy neurotic dude that terrorizes his therapist. But anyways, in part of the movie, he's like, okay, baby steps out of the office, baby steps down the steps, baby steps to the bus stop. It's working. And
Yeah.
so, I have this joke in my brain of like, okay, baby steps. I just need to do this little thing. And now there's a lot of stuff in my life that I sort of unraveled that way. And the moped trip, I started with that mindset of like, well, if a moped can go 10 kilometers, it can go 100 kilometers. If it can go 100 kilometers, it can go 1,000 kilometers. And if it can go 1,000 kilometers, then I can get to Bali, no problem.
Yeah.
And I'll buy it for cheap. I'll sell it for about the same price I bought it for. I'll have complete flexibility. I'll be able to travel anywhere I want. I'll be very spontaneous. Um, and that's exactly how it went.
Hmm.
And some days I would travel 10 kilometers. Some days I would travel no kilometers. Some days, I think the most I ever did in one day was like 300 kilometers, which like my ass hurt so bad by the end of the day. But it was still that mindset. Like
Sure.
all you gotta do is you do this much each day. There are so many quotes about like some progress is better than no progress. You
Hmm.
can take a rest, but don't quit.
Yeah.
Like there's literally thousands of quotes about that. And so it's just that mindset of like, yeah, as long as I just continually make a little bit of progress each day, eventually I'll end up at the other end of Indonesia.
Yeah. And I'm sure that trip was amazing. And that mindset going
Oh,
into it is perfect because there's so many men out there who have like this big daunting task, whether it's in their business or a conversation with their family or coming out about their sexuality or something. And a lot of us we can't see the ultimate destination. You couldn't see the end of the line, but I always said if you're in the dark, as long as you could see one step ahead of you, then you have somewhere to go. And you just trust as you step into the unknown that you'll eventually find the light. And you found a lot of that light in many points in your life, whether that was after your divorce and you lived in a van for a while and now you're traveling the world and every single day it's like, well, what's the next step? And
mhm.
you're living it now, every moment, moment by moment. And so for those out there who have some sort of daunting task, is like, what is that first step you can take to create that snowball effect so that it's
Yeah.
not this big daunting mountain? It's like, what is that first step? And so, as we finish up here, I have one last question, and then we will go into some rapid questions. But this podcast is called Rage On for a reason, because I want to share the hero's journey of men out there who have like gone through struggles like yourself and hard times and darkness and managed to rage on in that and to push forward and forge forward. And a lot of people don't understand what I mean by rage. They associate it with anger. But I always believe that anger is a secondary emotion to fear, that when we are
Mhm.
fearful, often it outcomes anger to protect us. But
Yeah.
rage, I believe, is a secondary emotion to love. That is a deep form of love. That when we see a mother trying to protect her child from someone trying to injure them, that's not fear. That is the deepest form of love. That I will go and risk my life to protect my child out of my deepest love for them. And so in your life and through all of these struggles you've been through, and even now as you travel the world and do all these great things, what has been the reason or the people or the person that you have raged on for to keep going through all of this hard time, struggle, and darkness in your life?
Man, honestly, the number of times that I have just screamed at the sky because, like, I fucking love myself and I know I'm a good person and I know that I'm so capable and so talented and so worthy of the things that I want out of life. And life is a struggle and life is weird and life is random. But I will be so fucking goddamned if I roll over and don't put every effort I can into finding out how to create the type of life that I know I deserve. And so
Mm,
the rage has been for myself versus everything that is in my way, between me and the peace and community and comfort and security that I know that I deserve and want and am capable of building around me. And then not only just like, oh, I just need a small place to call my own and some peace and quiet. Like, no, once I accomplish that, like the amount of creative energy that I have and the amount of creative output and the amount of bursting joy for making the world around me a more interesting, better place is going to be exponential when I feel like I have both feet underneath me again. And so right now, traveling the world, I mean, I'm in different hotels every day, every week, and I'm fucking raw dogging life because I can't get Adderall in Southeast Asia, and literally nothing else works. And so ADHD is like full strength right now. Um, and yet I'm churning for myself. Like, and like I said about the actionable steps, like, okay, I have all of this in front of me. My eyes are swimming. But like, what can I just grasp and do?
mhm,
And through that method, like, I have a patent and I'm coming out with my second patent soon. And why we fear failure is gaining momentum and my design business and all of these things. Like I'm setting up all of this stuff. And then when I get back to the US and I get that platform of consistency and security and some Adderall, um, I feel like I'm just gonna be like this unstoppable force. And I'm so excited for that. But the rage has all been just for me. Like the my before I got divorced, I was so in love and so dedicated to my wife. And have you heard of Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, the book?
mhm,
Classic psychology. Um my reason for living used to be love, and it used to be love for my wife. And that was like, why do I wake up every day? Why do I try to be a better person? Why do I accomplish the things that I accomplish? It's like, well, I want to pour all of that energy into this relationship that we're building, and I want to build a future for us and all of that. So now in the vacuum of that, reframing your meaning in life is not easy. And so to take it from being love into more of a self-focused, self-actionable thing like um, great works or acts of service, it's really difficult. It's very easy to wallow in existentialism as you're trying to figure out how to redefine meaning in life to something else. Um, but now that I've shifted it over into all of these amazing, great things I'm creating that are going to help other people so much, it's both simultaneously creating a great work, but also simultaneously meaning in my life for the service of others at the
mhm,
same time. And so like all of the rage is just for me knowing that I'm capable of achieving that vision.
Amen, brother.
And yeah, and especially, you know, solo traveling through Asia for a year, it's like I am alone. It's the the rage, the passion is purely for me.
Hmm. I love it. And you're gaining so much experience and so much knowledge in that it will all come together into something. And I that's something I had to tell myself when I was in the unknown. And every day you're in the unknown, in a new city, in a new hotel, eating
Yeah.
God knows what, new food. And
It's the weirdest things I can find, really.
and you know what? That's a beautiful way to live, because a lot of people just fall into their comforts and do what they know. But it's when you can really fall in love with being in the void and being in the unknown of the world that you expand your capacity to handle anything, to handle pain, to handle fear, to handle crazy situations that you never thought you could do before. And it's only a matter of you stepping into that unknown and taking those risks. So I applaud you for that. Um,
I
and with
appreciate
that,
that.
you're welcome, man. And with that, we'll just finish off with some rapid fire questions
Go
and
for it.
call it a day. So this first question, this is I think crucial for you, but considering you're in a new hotel in a new place every single day, what is one non-negotiable activity that you do daily to keep you at your best and keep you taking care of yourself?
That is a tough one, actually, because you know I've been mentioning the ADHD frequently, but routine is not
Yeah.
a strength. Um, One thing that I decided was necessary as I was traveling was by the time I got to Korea, I could not handle not having a guitar. So I bought a guitar,
Yeah.
and it's just a little travel guitar, nothing special.
Yeah.
Um, but I play guitar all the time as a method for sort of like a active meditation, grounding, familiarity, comfort. You know, it's very peaceful. Um, and despite the fact that I'm traveling through Asia and despite the fact that I have so much scenery changing and so many interesting things around me, I spend so much time on my laptop finding those next little actionable steps. The daily thing
Yeah.
is the daily thing is this little fucker.
Is it a
So
journal?
no, this is my very own style of to-do lists. And
Wow.
this is my and it's organized in a weird way. It has all sorts of other content thrown into it. Um, the chronology of it is dubious at best, but at the same time, like this thing holds my brain together. And so I'm always writing stuff down on it. I'm always going back and checking through. I'm always checking things off. And when I'm looking for like, okay, my brain is swimming right now. I'm a little overwhelmed. I'm in a new city. I'm tired, but I know that I can still squeeze some progress out right now. I know I
Yeah.
can do something. I know that there's something in here that I can check off right now.
Yeah.
Um, so like before I was earlier today, I was walking down the street and I was like, yeah, I should do this. Yeah, I should do this. Yeah, I should do this. I'll do it later. I was like, wait a minute, I can do that on my phone right now. And I whipped out my phone, and as I'm walking, I wrote a great little response to an email on LinkedIn to somebody. And then I wrote the outline for another article that I want to post. And then I did this, and like the amount of work that I can do from my phone is nuts. And so the way that I can work with my phone and I can work with this, and then when I'm really serious about it, I can sit down on my laptop. But those three things together, um, I'm always pushing myself to do those next actionable steps. Um, and you know, I'm very gracious with myself and patient with myself, where I know that I need to rest. Like resting is doing something,
Hmm.
but I'm also taking great joy in the amount of hard work that I'm putting into churning and churning and churning and keeping myself afloat so that when I do get back to the US, I'm going to do some pretty amazing things.
Beautiful, man. Beautiful. I know the struggle of keeping routine when you're constantly moving. That's why I'm kind of landed
Yes.
here in Guatemala at the moment. So I could be like, I need to go to the gym to keep my mind sane. All right, awesome. This is going to be an interesting thing as well, considering all the food you've eaten. But what food is your guilty pleasure?
Hmm. Like at the moment or in general?
I'll leave
Because
that to you.
so I'm in Hanoi right now, and I've been in Hanoi for I think 6 days. And I got here, and literally as I was walking from the bus station to my hotel, I stopped at this place and got a dish called bun cha, and apparently it's like a Hanoi specialty.
Mhm.
It's these little grilled pork patties that are in a soup with some vegetables, and then they give you cold noodles on the side, and then they give you some spring rolls on the side, and then they give you this huge bowl of just mixed leaves, random mixed leaves. And you take all of these things and you dip them in the soup and eat them. And then I make my soup pretty spicy. It is incredible. It's amazing. And I've had it every single day that I've been here. And so
Oh,
now it's like my daily bun cha. Either lunch or dinner is always bun cha, and I always go to a new place. So I'm sampling my way through Hanoi. Um, and then a new guilty pleasure since I've been over in Asia is durian. And I actually
hmm,
really like durian now.
that's
Um,
interesting.
yeah, and even if I don't want to go for like the full-blown experience and have actual raw durian, there's lots of durian ice cream and durian candy
Yeah,
and durian pudding and all those kind of things. And it's an intense but rich flavor, and I'm really enjoying it.
yeah, yeah.
Otherwise, cheese. I'm from Wisconsin.
Oh
Like
yeah.
I'm, and I
That's more a
haven't had
comfort. Was that more of a comfort food?
cheese.
Yeah,
Oh
to like bring
yeah.
you back home when you're away.
I don't know because I haven't had good cheese since I've been in Asia, I don't think. But
Yeah,
if
there isn't
somebody
a
gave
lot
me
of
like a
cheese out
block
there.
of Wisconsin cheddar and like a little charcuterie board of Wisconsin
Yeah.
cheeses, I would be in heaven.
I love it. I am a cheese ho myself, so we're
Yeah.
we're aligned there. All right. What brings you the most joy in life right now?
Mm. Right now, seeing actionable progress towards some of these really big goals of mine brings me like childlike delight. Like
Mhm.
I love the fact that am still so youthful and have this like childlike wonder and childlike enthusiasm. And so I love playing, and I love and so sometimes, man, when it was like something happens and I feel like a good solid move forward on developing these patents that I'm developing, literally like giggling like a kid. Like I'm so happy, like, oh my God, it's happening. Like it's. Um uh yeah. Otherwise, I mean I have naughtier answers, but whatever. Um naturally. But feeling those moments of progress where you feel like self-actualized as you can see your life moving towards self-actualization is just so rewarding.
Love that, man. That's beautiful. I think that's what we all strive for is what is the highest level that we could be at of ourselves. So, all right, last one. Which country that you've visited has been the most impactful or changed your perspective the most?
Indonesia. Indonesia, partially because I saw the most, or I saw more of Indonesia than any other country that I'd been through. Because of the means of travel by motorbike.
Mhm.
um I was like going through tiny towns and going through jungle and going through rice paddies. I traveled a lot through Japan, but I was on trains and stuff that really kind of separates you from your surroundings. But traveling 4,000 kilometers through Indonesia and oh, and so flying into Sumatra, um, Indonesia was my first Muslim majority country that I've ever traveled to.
Mm,
So there's a huge culture shock of being in heavily Muslim culture, uh, combined with absolute fascination at the jungle and rainforest and rice paddies and how beautiful it was. Um, they are not used to getting foreigners there at all. And so the entire way through Sumatra into Java, I was treated like a celebrity at every town I
mhm.
went into. Like strangers would run up and want to take pictures with me. And I have
Yeah.
all of these pictures surrounded by Indonesians that have never seen a white guy before. Um, and the food was so different. Um, and super fucking spicy, which I love. And I was so raw and so exposed and so present through Indonesia. And it was just massively transforming. And I made some really good, deep friendships, and then also had a relationship that started in Jakarta and followed me to Bali and even to Bangkok. Um, so having a really deep romantic connection as well. Um, yeah, Indonesia's cool. Indonesia's a really amazing, beautiful, varied country. It's unbelievable landscape, really friendly, warm, amazing people. I always felt safe. I did some weird, sketchy shit, and I always felt safe. Like,
Yeah.
you know, here's a path going into the jungle, and I'm just gonna walk down the path because it's a jungle and I love jungle. And oh wait, I'm in Sumatra. There are tigers and rhinoceroses and elephants and shit that wants to kill me. Cool.
Well, I'm happy
Yeah,
that that didn't happen. I'm happy you're still alive, and
yeah,
sounds amazing, man. I that's the one of the few countries out there that didn't make it to, and you hear most people just go to Bali, but what you've experienced was completely different. So
yeah. If anybody wants to go to Sumatra, I have lots of recommendations, and it is probably one of the more exotic, perspective shifting places that you will go.
amazing. Well, with that, where can people reach out and connect with you, brother?
So on Instagram, if you want to follow my personal shenanigans, that's at Have You Met Micah Yet? It's Micah. Um,
I'll put it below in the show notes so people can find you.
um, and Why We Fear Failure on Instagram as well, has a lot of these psychology, physiology, and cultural unpackings about the fear of failure and all of the different factors behind it. And then myself, Micah Kearns, and Why We Fear Failure can both be found on LinkedIn as well. And there's a lot of content being published specifically on LinkedIn, stuff that's a little more business focused, like fear and leadership, fear and interpersonal uh, communication skills and management, stuff like that. And then keep an eye out for the patent whenever
Perfect,
that
man. I'll
drops.
make sure all those are in the show notes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, let me know, and I'll post about it with a clip from this video as well. And I highly recommend, if you're listening, definitely at a minimum follow Micah's journeys on his Instagram, because he's doing something new, eating something crazy every single day, and I'm living through you. Even though I wish I could be out there right now, I got some other things to be doing. So live
Yeah.
vicariously through Micah as he travels through Asia for the next however much time.
Um, Honestly, I think I'm going to be in Asia for another month, month and a half. And then, once I'm here for one solid year, I really do feel like my projects are calling me back to America for at least a little bit. I
Hmm.
know that the patent and getting the patent licensed and manufactured, really needs me on the ground in the US. But then once I get that ball rolling, then I'll see what life throws at me then, and we'll make decisions at that point. I might end up joining you in South America.
Let's see, man. I look forward to seeing you wherever we meet in the void of the unknown. So, Micah, it's been a pleasure. I feel like we could sit here for another 2 hours and just chat about so many different things.
They barely scratch the surface of
Maybe we'll
what's
do
possible.
another episode another day for sure. But it's been a pleasure to hear not only about your story, the struggles you've been through, as well as the amazing commitment you have to yourself, to your growth, and to serving others through getting to your highest self. So I appreciate you. I respect you, and stay safe and keep sharing those journeys with us, brother.
Awesome. I appreciate that so much. It was really good to see you and really good to be able to talk about all of these things. I know that deeper, uglier things are hard to talk about sometimes, but it's good, it's healthy.
With that said, Micah Kearns, everyone.